I was invited to an innovation day of a steel company, and I never thought I would be hearing such a diverse range of different aspects that we have been talking about today. They asked me to summarize this day and to do an ending talk about 30 minutes about business and creativity. So I've been listening to what people have been talking about, and this is just a few of the words that we have been talking about today. Everything from innovation, the innovation of the car, to people buying illegal drugs, to electronic art, to steel, of course. But most of all, we have been talking about two things. Or actually, I would say one thing. Innovation. I have been invited to conferences in all kinds of industries, from nuclear power plants to advertising, and now a steel conference. I write books on creativity. I've written the book that you have just received, Das Ideenbuch, or the Idea Book. But I just kind of have to understand, just have to ask you, because I usually do, but I'm very interested. I would like to know, how relevant do you think it is that they have been mentioning innovation so much in only a few hours? I'm going to ask you two questions. First question, how many of you think that being innovative is important in your job? Raise your hand. Yes, of course. But here's the second question. How many of you think that you are creative? It always takes a bit longer to answer the second one. Actually, I must say, very impressive. I've asked this in 30 countries all around the world, and the first question, everyone always says yes. Doesn't matter where you go, doesn't matter what industry, doesn't matter which country, everyone always says yes. Innovation is important in my industry. Of course, also in any industry. But then we have the second question, are you a creative person? Normally, about 45-50% say yes. In this group, almost 60-70% said yes. It's extremely high to be Europe. This, in Europe, more like 45%. In America, of course, it's like 95%, but that's America. I live in Asia. I've been living in China for 4 years. Actually, I just moved to Singapore, but the last 5 years I've been living in Asia. In China, actually, interestingly enough, what do you think? If you ask Chinese people, are you an innovative person? How many people say yes, percentage-wise? What do you get? 10%. Yeah, that is what Europeans think. But do you know what happens? 80%. India, I was in India last week. India, 90%. Chinese think they are creative. But if you go to Japan or Singapore, where I live now, then you're down to 20%. I did a speech a couple of weeks ago in the Supreme Court of Singapore. Is creativity important in your job? Everyone said yes. Are you a creative person? 20% said yes. They're only beaten by South Korea. South Korea is the worst country in the world. Last time I was in South Korea, 300 people in the audience. Is creativity important in your job? Yes. Everyone said yes. Are you a creative person? Not a single person raised his hand. I said, maybe they don't understand Swinglish. So I repeated it and I said it slower. No one in this room think you are a creative person? One man raised his hand and said no. Not compared to Leonardo da Vinci. That is how South Korean people think. Are you a creative person? No, not compared to the most creative person who has ever lived. What is the American way of thinking? Are you creative? Yes, compared to my brother. I was actually going to do another speech today. And the reason I was going to do that is because I just did a speech 1 week ago where Mr. Edel was there. And I said, I'm not going to do the same one. It would be boring for him. Yes. But then I listened today. And while you were having lunch, I changed my presentation a bit. Because there were 2 words that was mentioned over and over and over during these 2 days. I mean, during these few hours. And it was innovation and it was China. So I felt, if I'm going to summarize the day, that's what I should talk about. I should talk about innovation in China, because I write books on creativity. The books that you have received, the idea book, was recently included in this book called the 100 Best Business Books of All Time. I'm very proud of that. But I am, in the last 4 or 5 years, I have been writing a new book, which is about creativity in developing countries. I have spent the last 4 years traveling to more than 30 countries. I have interviewed 200 people that in some aspect is working with creativity in developing countries. I have interviewed the Minister of Innovation in Indonesia. I have interviewed the mobile phone designer in South Korea. I went to Turkey. I interviewed a mathematical professor. I went to South Africa. More than 20 countries. Because I wanted to understand what is happening in the world right now when it comes to creativity and innovation. So that's what I will talk about today. But let's begin. Let's begin by defining creativity. We talk a lot about innovation today, but innovation is one thing, but what is an idea? I'm going to give you my favorite definition. It's a very simple definition. It goes like this. An idea is that one person takes 2 formally known things and combines them in a new way. One person takes 2 formally known things and combines them in a new way. And I knew you were going to be here, electronic art and things like that. I thought I should use something that had, I didn't know what you were going to talk about, but something that had like design and creativity and so on. So I took this Swedish designer. His name is Alexander Lervik, and he's right now being hyped in Sweden as being such a creative designer. But technically, I don't know. He's just taking previously known things and combining them in a new way. Let's see how he's done that. He does lamps. So here is his invention. You take the concept of a lamp, which is a previously known thing. Now you take the concept of a swing, which is a previously known thing. Now you take lamp and you take swing and you combine it. What do you get? Huh? Yes, there are basically 2 ways to think here. You either say swing lamp or lamp swing. It's like the 2 ways. Okay, so this is what he did. He did swing lamp. He made a swing that the kids can go out in the middle of the night and swing and the lamp is a lamp. Is it innovative? I don't know. I like it. But technically, he just took 2 previously known things and combined it in a new way. Here's another example. Alexander, he took the concept of a lamp. It's a previously known thing. He took the concept of a do not disturb sign, which is a previously known thing. Now you take lamp and do not disturb sign, and combine them, what do you get? Do not disturb lamp. That's exactly what he did. This is now being sold to hotels and also to restaurants, which you can use in the restrooms. You go into the restrooms, 3 of the doors have a red handle, 1 of them have a green handle. Which one would you go up to? Actually, I have to tell you, the last version of this one, the handle is not red. The whole goddamn door is red. There are 3 red doors and 1 green door. You go to the green one. That's innovative, it's creative, but technically, he just took 2 previously known things and combined them in a new way. So, here is Alexander. Now, if you take the concept of Alexander and you combine him with a lamp, what do you get? Well, that's what he did. Alexander went to a hospital and asked for a brain scan. So he put himself into an MRI machine, went in, got a scan of his own brain, took the 3D model that he got, went to a 3D printer, printed his own brain, put a lamp inside. There it is. The next one he's doing is the brain of Einstein. you can soon buy a lamp that is the Einstein brain shining on you. Creative, yes, but technically he just took two previously known things and combined them in a new way. That means that creativity actually is very simple. It can be defined into a formula, which I have done. Here it is. An idea equals that a person takes his or her knowledge and information and combines that in a new way. On paper, very simple, but actually very hard. The number of ideas should equal the number of people times the knowledge and information they have access to. And what's happening in the world right now is that we have an explosion of people. We all know that. But we also have an explosion of people who get knowledge. And as I think you were saying in your previous discussion, we have an explosion of information thanks to the internet. If you like innovation, there's never been a better time in history to be alive right now. The problem is that most people will raise their hand and say that creativity is important. And most people, especially in Europe and America, will also raise their hand and say that they think they are creative, but technically that is not true. We are much worse at being able to see how quickly the world is changing and adopt than we think we are. So I'm going to show you two pictures. These are two pictures from the last time we had an innovation explosion. This is from the Industrial Revolution. In 30 years, we invented all this cool new technology. The train, the spinning jenny, the propeller, the steam engine. All of these new things in a very short time period, and innovation just took off. Problem is that people who were living at the time didn't understand what was going on. Let's look at this one. Here is the first train. Now remember the definition of an idea. You take two previously known things and you combine them in a new way. Which thing did they take to get the train? Obviously. Well, you take a steam engine and you take a horse carriage and you combine it, you have a train. You see that? Here's the problem. They build trains that look exactly like horse carriages. Can you see that? Even put people on top, see? Now let me ask you a question. Why is it a problem to sit on top of a train? Huh? You get smoke in your eyes. What? How did they solve the problem? Raise the chimney. Because of course you should still sit on top of the train. Oh, I have to tell you this, I'm sorry. I did a speech a couple of months ago in Russia for Oriflame. Do you know Oriflame? There's this huge cosmetic and perfume company. And this will show you how your industry is going to affect how you think. I showed them this picture and I said, what is the problem? And they said, you get smoke in the eyes. I said, that's correct. How did they solve the problem? And one guy said, did they scent the smoke? Yeah, they put lavender in it and everything was fine. No, of course the problem was smoke. But there was a bigger problem. The bigger problem was speed. Because the train is not a horse carriage. The train started going faster and faster. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Suddenly trains were going 100 kilometers per hour. Now what happens if you go on a train going in 100 kilometers per hour if you sit on top? You fall off. You know Volvo? Swedish car company? Actually not Swedish anymore. It's a Chinese, but okay, never mind, okay? I showed this picture to them, and I said, excuse me, we have been innovating, you have been innovating the car for 100 years. What have you been able to do? And they looked, and they looked, and they looked. And after a while, one man raised his hand, and he said, well, we turned two guys around. Now, of course, we can look at this picture and we can laugh. And we can look at the picture of the train and we can laugh. But they are going to laugh at you. 100 years from now, they are going to laugh at you and they are going to say, these people, look at them. They were living in the midst of an idea explosion and they didn't understand what they could do. We just don't see it. And there's been a lot of talk here about competitiveness between Europe and Asia. And I agree with all the previous speakers about why Europe, for example, need to push harder the rights for nice work environments or environmentally friendly production or whatever it is. We have advantages in this part of the world that they just don't have, and that we need to get them to learn from us. But what I would like to use my second part of this speech to talk about is not what we can teach them. Because that's usually what we talk about on an innovation conference like this. We talk about all the advantages that we have in Europe, and we talk about how we are going to teach them. I would like to talk about the opposite. I like to talk about what can we learn from them. What can we learn from people in developing countries? Something we rarely do, hardly ever do. But I think we can. Actually, I believe, and I was convinced about it when I moved to China 4.5 years ago, that we did a huge mistake. In this part of the world, when we divided the world into two parts, developing countries and developed countries. Why? Because those words that we choose to put on ourselves, those words we use to describe ourselves, will, after a while, start to define ourselves. So let's look at the words we choose to put on ourselves and on them. Let's start with them. A developing country. What does that mean? What does the word developing mean? Motion. It's develop. I am developing my country. I am building a house. I am baking a cake. I am running a race. I am doing something, which means it can be changed. It's dynamic. It's not solid. It is in flux. It is under development. I am developing it. That's them, those poor people in developing countries. Now let's see what we choose to call ourselves. What does a developed country mean? It means static. It means done. My cake is baked. My house is built. My country is done. How are you doing with yours? Now, I'm not saying that the developed world stopped innovating. For God's sake, no. I am saying, by defining ourselves as being developed, we slowed down. And to slow down in a world that has never been developing faster than it is right now is absolutely dangerous. So for once, let's not sit and brag about how good we are. Instead, let's go down from our high horses and see what can we learn from people in developing countries when it comes to creativity and imagination and innovation. Now, I don't have so much time, so I will only talk about 3 things, but I have identified 8. Here is advantage number 1. If you live in a world, if you live in a developing part of the world, you are living in a world that is changing. In order to be able to see how the world could become, you need to see that it is changing. You need to live in change. Ask yourself this question. And if you were living in Manchester during the Industrial Revolution, do you think it was easier for you to see the speed of innovation than if you were living in the middle of northern Norway? Obviously. So let's look at 2 people. Since I'm from Sweden and used to live in China, I have now chosen Stockholm and Beijing. But I could have chosen Linz or Vienna or any other city in Western Europe. Let's see how the world has changed. Now, I'm not saying it's a good thing that they tear their cities down. It's a good thing we kept our cities. But ask yourself the question, who has the ability to see that the world is changing? Who grows up with it in his DNA? Well, the woman in Stockholm or the woman in Beijing? Obviously, it means that we, living in the world where speed of change is slower, we need to try harder than they, just to keep up with them. Now, I know that the people sitting here are probably one of the most educated, highly paid people in this part of Europe. You're very successful business people and you are global companies, so you should and would probably know things about what is happening in the world. But let's try anyway. Raise your hand if you know the name of the leader of China. 8. Raise your hand if you know the name of the leader of India. 1. Raise your hand if you know the name of the leader of India and China. 1 who heard me before. At least you learned something. Not a goddamn person in Europe knows nothing about the world. Because these are the 2 largest countries in the world. Almost 40% of the world's population are living in those countries, and you don't even know the name of the leader of the 2 largest. We know less about the world today than we did in the 1970s, before we had the internet. You know who Mao is, and you know who Gandhi is. How come you know that, and you don't know Hu Jintao and Xing? Now let's practice. Xing. Like the Thai beer, you know, Singa, but without the A. Xing. China, Hu Jintao. Who took the gin? Hu Jintao. Now you know something. Because here's the point. If you don't even know that, what the hell do you know? Because I could have asked you, say the name of 10 famous sports people living in developing countries, or 10 scientists, or 10 trendsetters, or 10 superstars, or 10 CEOs, and you wouldn't know, because we don't know anything about them. We're absolutely ignorant, and here is why this is a problem. When I came to Singapore 2 years ago, the Chinese movie Red Cliff just premiered in the cinemas. Same weekend, American movie Batman also premiered in the cinema, which means a 20-year-old Singaporean on Friday night goes and watches Batman, on Saturday night goes and watches Red Cliff. I've actually asked, I've gone to a university in Singapore, I asked 120-year-old Singaporeans, how many of you have seen the movie Red Cliff? 80% said yes. How many of you have seen the movie Batman? 80% said yes. Then I went back to Europe. Went to a business school in Stockholm. How many of you have seen the movie Batman? 80% said yes. How many of you have seen the movie Red Cliff? 1 person said yes. He was a Chinese exchange student. Now here is why this is important. Because 20 years ago, when I went to university, we didn't need to know anything about them. But as we heard from Mercedes-Benz, their largest market is not Germany anymore, it's China. It doesn't matter which product you do, the largest market for your product is now developing countries, and we don't know anything about them. Now, who has a knowledge advantage? Since we were talking about refrigerators earlier, one of the people I interviewed was an industrial designer for refrigerators. She was working for Whirlpool, American Whirlpool. She was designing a refrigerator for the American market. She has never been to America. But she said, I can design a refrigerator for the American market because I know what an American puts in his refrigerator. But you can never design a refrigerator for me because you have no clue what I put in my refrigerators. A couple of months ago, China bought Volvo. Swedish journalists, they called me and said, Fredrik, what do you say about this? Because in Sweden, the big debate right now was that the Chinese were going to steal Swedish innovation. When the Americans bought Volvo, Americans was buying Swedish innovation. When the Chinese bought Volvo, they are stealing our ideas. I said, they're not here to steal, they paid for it. They were the only one who wanted to buy the damn thing. I said, we should not be afraid because the Chinese are here stealing our ideas. We should be afraid because we are not there stealing theirs. But this is not a talk to politicians. And my whole speech has been a metaphor. Because we all understand the notion of a developing country and a developed country. but it's just a metaphor. It is a metaphor about you and your company. What I would like to ask you to do is to end my speech by asking you to say and think about two questions. Question number one, is my company a developing company, or is my company a developed company? I think you understand what I mean. Nokia is a perfect example of a company that used to be a developing company, but the last 5 years became a developed company. And when is the last time you looked at a Nokia phone and you said, wow, look at this cool innovation? They stopped. They became complacent. They thought that they had 40% market share, and that is going to guarantee innovation, but it's not going to. As someone said earlier today, the only way to survive is to constantly innovate. So I would like to end my speech with a word. It's my favorite word at the moment. It's an Icelandic word, and the Icelandic word is heimskur. Have you ever heard about this word? Heimskur. It means moron, idiot. The cool thing with Icelandic language, it's the same language as 1,000 years ago. It's Viking lingo. Now, what was a heimskur? Now, if you were an Icelandic Viking, you were supposed, if you had a farm, you're supposed to build yourself a ship, rent some guys, then sail south. Sail down to Norway and Sweden and Scotland and France and Denmark and Germany and steal. Steal as much as you could. Steal gold, steal silver, steal all the beautiful Scottish women. You know that? You know why Scottish people are so ugly? Because the Icelandic Vikings went and stole all the beautiful Scottish women and went back. Steal anything that you could, but most of all, steal ideas. Go down, look, what are they doing in Germany? What are they doing in Norway? Take those ideas, go home to your farm. Go home to your farm and use those ideas there. If you didn't do that, you were a heimskur. If you didn't do that, you were an idiot. Of the 200 people I have interviewed in over 20 developing countries, my last question in every interview had been to them, give me one message to bring home to Europe. Give me one message to tell people in developed countries. And almost all of them have said the same thing. You have to become more curious about what is happening in the world right now and what we can do with all those innovations. So I leave you with a question. Are you a developing person, or are you a developed person? I hope you understand what I mean. Thank you very much.